Hello AP US History students and welcome to another edition of AP Daily Knockoff. My name is Marlene Ketelaar and I'm a San Marino High School junior and I'm currently enrolled in Mr. Peter Bocconi's A-Push course. San Marino High School is a small 9th to 12th grade public school in the much larger LA County and located just a few miles from the well-known Huntington Library and Botanical Gardens. In today's video, we will be exploring AP US History topic 5.4, the Compromise of 1850. By the end of this video, especially for the May AP US History exam, you will need to be able to explain the similarities and differences in how regional attitudes affected federal policy in the period after the Mexican-American War. But before beginning my presentation on topic 5.4 and the relating learning objective, I want to take a few seconds to describe in one sentence what the Compromise of 1850 was. The Compromise of 1850 was a group of 5 bills introduced by Senator Henry Clay of the Whig Party and Senator Stephen A. Douglas of the Democratic Party that attempted to resolve the tension over slavery between the North and the South over the Mexican-American War and 10 years prior to the Civil War. The key concepts relating to the Compromise of 1850 include the Mexican secession led to heated controversies over whether to allow slavery in the newly acquired territories. Debates over slavery came to dominate political discussion in the 1850s, culminating in the bitter election of 1860 and the secession of Southern states. The courts and national leaders made a variety of attempts to resolve the issue of slavery in the territories, including the Compromise of 1850. Now I'm going to talk to you about the 5 main events that led up to the Compromise of 1850. The first issue, the Mexican-American War, which started in 1846 due to a land dispute between the Republic of Texas and Mexico. Texas had gained its independence from Mexico in 1836. However, Mexico did not acknowledge Texas's independence, which presumably led to a lot of tension between the two nations. Both Texas and the United States wanted to annex Texas and successfully did so in 1845 when James K. Polk, the United States president at the time, signed a resolution. This event furthered conflict between Mexico, Texas, and now the United States, eventually leading to the Mexican-American War in 1846 due to a border dispute along the southern border of Texas. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ended the Mexican-American War, forced Mexico to acknowledge Texas as a separate entity and a part of the United States. It also set the southern border of Texas and led to a massive addition of land to the United States, which included present-day Alta California, New Mexico, Utah, Arizona, and Nevada. This acquisition of land, however, reopened the massive conflict between the North, who did not want the new territories to become slave states, and the South, who did want the new territories to become slave states, which had previously been put to bed by the Compromise of 1820. Issue 2. Through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, Texas's southern border was settled. But that didn't stop Texas from trying to increase its land. Instead, Texas decided to extend its northern and western borders, claiming land in New Mexico, which it had never controlled before. This was a point of controversy because Texas, a slave state, claimed half of New Mexico, where the issue of slavery had not been settled yet. Additionally, Texas's capital was far away from New Mexico, making it ineffective in governing New Mexico. And on top of that, the two territories had a long history of conflict. The South, of course, was in favor of the border that extended Texas's land because it increased slavery's hold on the nation, while North heavily opposed Texas's claims to present-day New Mexico. The South went as far as to threaten Southern secession in order to get what they wanted. Texas had also run up a lot of debt, $10 million, during its time as an independent nation, which it was desperate to pay back. This is an important point in the settling of this dispute. On the other hand, 1848 marked the beginning of the California Gold Rush, which led to a huge population boom in the California territory. Because of this population boom and the ruling of California by military governors, preventing the establishment of a territorial government, a constitutional convention was held in California. During the convention, they agreed to join the Union and to outlaw slavery. The last came as a shock to the Southerners, who had assumed that Southern California would abide by the 1820 Compromise, or the Missouri 3630 line, and become a slave state. The fourth issue, due to an improvement in transportation in the form of railroads, roads, and ships, there were an increased number of fugitive slaves fleeing to the north to escape slavery. A fugitive slave law had been passed in 1783 that granted the jurisdiction to all state and federal judges over cases regarding fugitive slaves. In response, the North made personal liberty laws, making it harder to return alleged fugitive slaves to the South. Some other sources of controversy included the slave trade in Washington, D.C., which the North felt was a blemish on the nation. Additionally, the Utah and New Mexico territories applied for statehood, so the status of slavery needed to be determined in these territories. This was a problem, however, because the population of this region were Mormons, which was not accepted by the government at the time. Tension between the North and South grew as the conflict remained unresolved. The 31st Congress opened in December 1849 to discuss the statehood of California and to set Texas's western and northern borders. There were multiple ideas presented: the use of popular sovereignty, the continuation of the Missouri Line, and the outlawing of slavery in all the newly acquired territory, also known as the Wilmot Proviso. None of these ideas were accepted, however. Not until January 1850 did Henry Clay, known as the Great Compromiser, offer his plans for the Compromise of 1850. In January 1850, Senator Henry Clay proposed an omnibus, compiled of 5 separate topics addressing all 5 issues. It appeased the North since California was being admitted as a free state, and Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, outlawed the slave trade. And it appeased the South since it provided for a stricter set of fugitive slave laws, and while the slave trade was banned, slavery itself was not outlawed in Washington, D.C. And it allowed for the residents of Utah and New Mexico territories to choose to be a slave or non-slave state through popular sovereignty. In a debate on April 17th, a committee of 13 delegates debated over the Texas border. This debate soon became heated, and a quarrel broke out between the Vice President Fillmore and Senator Thomas Hart Benton. The quarrel came to a point where the floor leader Henry S. Foote drew a gun on Senator Benton, leading him to respond to "Let the assassin fire." However, Henry Clay's bill lacked the support necessary to pass, and in July 1850, it was rejected by the Senate. President Zachary Taylor, the president at the time, died, leaving Vice President Fillmore to take over. Fillmore encouraged the bill, but Senator Henry Clay was too fatigued to continue debating, so Senator Stephen A. Douglas took over. He decided to reintroduce the bills as 5 separate bills rather than an omnibus. The Compromise of 1850 addressed 5 topics, the first topic being the admission of California as a free state. The second was the setting of the Texas boundary, which Henry Clay proposed by having the federal government assume Texas's debt as long as Texas surrenders its claim to present-day New Mexico. The compromise split up the Utah and New Mexico boundary and allowed Utah and New Mexico to decide whether popular sovereignty, whether they wanted slave states to become slave states. Another part of the compromise allowed for a stricter fugitive slave law, which required citizens to assist in apprehending runaway slaves, and it denied enslaved people a right to a trial by jury. The last bill permitted the continuation of the slavery in Washington, D.C., but it outlawed the slave trade. The bill became law in September of 1850. The Compromise of 1850 had many positive and negative short-term and long-term effects. In response to the stricter fugitive slave laws, the North organized vigilance committees, which sent endangered enslaved African Americans to safety in Canada, used violence to rescue fugitive slaves, and helped fugitive slaves escape to the North. Due to the admittance of California as a non-slave state, the balance in the Senate was tipped in favor of the North, giving them control of the Senate. Although Henry Clay tried hard to prevent a civil war, the Compromise of 1850 only postponed the inevitable by 10 years. Henry Clay, however, is worthy the name the Great Compromiser, since this compromise did have some positive results. The compromise temporarily diffused the political confrontation between the status of the acquired territories. The topic of slavery, however, was called into question again during the Kansas-Nebraska Act. The compromise did allow for more Northerners to join the abolitionist cause. It was likely that if the compromise had not been proposed, the North would have been indifferent about the South's secession. Therefore, the compromise was beneficial, since the stricter fugitive slave laws led to a lot of previously moderate Northerners to outrage in converting them to abolitionism. Although the admission of California did lead to a tip in the balance of the Senate in favor of the North, the fugitive slave laws caused the most conflict, since it forced the Northerners to take a part in slavery. There was now a sharp division between the North and the South. Another problem was that the status of New Mexico and Utah were still unclear, and the unorganized portion of the Louisiana Purchase which both could possibly reopen the debate on slavery. Simply, the inability to properly dissolve the disputes led to a lot of resentment over the provisions, and eventually led to the Civil War. I hope this was beneficial to your understanding of the Compromise of 1850, and good luck on the May AP U.S. History exam.